something that I just really enjoy doing and giving back to the community and young girls to get them involved in aviation. Because let's be real, I didn't have something like that when I was their age. If I did, I truly believe I would be a totally different spot in my life than I am now.
Thankfully, we've attracted some amazing people to be recurring volunteers year after year after year. And right, we can just see by over multiple years interactions with them that you embody pre-flight ideals of positivity and hard work, making sure you're organized and responsible.
Network Low, it's Adam again. We are in the middle of our health and wellness month over on TPN Pro, but we didn't have a ton of guests that we could get on. Lots of people busy in April. And instead of me preaching at you, which I'm sure most people are sick of anyways, and if you're coming to TP Next, you'll probably hear it soon. Uh, that is May 6th and 7th. For those of you still interested, you can register. We've got American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, FlexJet, a whole host of other folks coming, both recruiters and vendors. Want to see you there if you can make it. If not, support those who are going with a attaboy, attagirl, and tell them to go and knock them dead. Because it's not just a job fair, even though that's what a lot of people want it to be. It is a networking conference and your opportunity to really open your aperture and see what other opportunities that you can get within aviation, what type of opportunities you can give others. Anyways, this episode is a bonus episode, if you will. I got to interview some friends from pre-flight camps. Pre-flight camps has been something that we at TPN have been staunch supporters of pre-flight camp and their camps that they have since essentially the beginning when we did an interview with Liz Green. So Brittany and Morgan joined me today. Fascinating human beings on very different paths and journeys inside of aviation, or even nothing really to do with aviation. And I was able to chat with them about where they're at, what they're doing with the nonprofit pre-flight camp, and also what their personal and professional lives look like and how that intertwines. It was really a good way for us to kind of give back. We'll probably re-air this episode in November in their giving season month, but it's something that I just have a real passion for in giving back to all of the community of aviation. Age is regardless of age, especially when you have two little daughters who may find an interest in the stuff that they're doing at pre-flight camp aside from the aviation aspect. So this was one that was very personal to me. I hope that you gain something from it. And if you have the means to volunteer or donate to their cause, please do so. They're going to be at TPNX and have the ability to chat with everybody individually. But I figured we'd do a little bit of pre-TPNX warm-up by airing this episode. Next week's episode is going to be the TPNX primer, so you'll definitely want to hit that one up if you're going. And even if you're not, you may learn some stuff about how you can best attend conferences and make the most of your time there, not only networking with individuals, but also at the meet and greets, which are really important for a host of different reasons. Anyways, enough for me. Let's get on with the conversation with Morgan and Brittany from Pre-Flight Camp. Hey, network, I have a great set of guests today. Normally we don't do two. We've got two wonderful women here to talk about something that's near and dear to both Matt and I's heart, pre-flight camps. And joining me is Morgan and Brittany, who are part of the pre-flight team. Instead of me doing the normal intro that I do, I wanted them to introduce themselves because they're uniquely qualified in different spaces to talk about this. One is going through the journey as we speak. One of them is at a different phase of her journey. So, Brittany, we'll start with you. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. Why don't you tell everybody kind of what your background is? Because I think it's pretty. You both have very unique backgrounds, but let's delve into yours here first.
Yeah. So outside of pre-flight, I am a flight attendant for British Airways. I commute from Phoenix, Arizona to London in the UK. I know it's wild, but I'm grateful to be able to have a job that allows me to see the world and get paid to do so. I also have my private pilot's license. I fly for fun right now. I'm working through my rating slowly but surely. And I do have loose goals to become an aerial firefighter in the end. But right now, I'm just really enjoying my time back and forth between the US and the UK. For pre flight, I have been with pre flight for 4 years now, I believe it is. I'm a board member and the treasurer. And then I also started the Mesa, Arizona camp location here 2 years ago. So this will be our third year in Mesa, Arizona. So I'm grateful to have had that and had really successful camps the last 2 years and looking forward to a successful camp this year.
And you'll be at TPNX this year, right, in Dallas?
I will, yeah. So this will be my second year again over at TPNX with Sarah, who is also one of our board members here at
Awesome.
Proof Right.
Yeah, we're excited to host you as we have been every year for a while now. And then Morgan, your background very different from Brittany. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a little bit harder to explain. So I've had a really circuitous route, but I'm currently an active duty Air Force member. I'm something called an operations analyst. So right now I get to be at MIT doing artificial intelligence research with the MIT team and with Lincoln Laboratories. And I like to fly in my free time as much as I can. I started out as a pilot in the Air Force. And then that route just didn't work for me. And so I've just kind of been pivoting ever since. So, and I've been lucky enough to be president of pre-flight since 2020. So I'm not the founder, as a lot of people know. Liz Green was the founder back in 2016. But just absolute wonderful experience leading pre-flight, and just so lucky to have a really good core board of directors right now and a core group of volunteers. So I'm really excited about where we're going.
And something we discussed kind of in the pre-show discussion was pre-flight is it really works because you don't just expose young girls, because they're not even young women at this point for some of them, to expose them to aviation and all that's around aviation, kind of making their brains work for the first time in a very different way. It kind of changes what they believe is truly possible because you don't just cater to somebody who's seen, like, it's not daughters of pilots. These are young ladies and who have never seen something like this before. And you use this very high trusted mentor process, and you have these extremely well run camps. And it's been now proven to be this repeatable, as we call the dynamic that happens year in and year out. And these young girls get to see this operation. When you combine that with where you've joined and where you've started to give back to the community of women inside of the aviation industry and beyond, just people who are interested in that world and kind of exposing them to all that that can entail. Where was your moment of belief that this was the right way to go? Brittany, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my moment of belief was I've always been a little background about me that I didn't explain at the beginning was I have always been involved in education. So before I was a flight attendant, I worked in special education classrooms for 8 years. I've always had a passion of leading younger individuals into just the world, into life and education. So kind of mix my love for aviation and then the education part of it together, and I fell in love with pre-flight's mission. And it was actually my former flight instructor, Madison, who got me involved in pre-flight. And it's something that I just really enjoy doing and giving back to the community and young girls to get them involved in aviation. Because let's be real, I didn't have something like that when I was their age. And if I did, I truly believe I would be a totally different spot in my life than I am now. Yeah. So, because I've had the passion to fly since I was before I was a teenager, like 10, 11, 12 years old. That's where I kind of fell in love with it. So,
And Morgan, we as Air Force individuals, you have a much different perspective at times. And sometimes it can be a little, mine was definitely a lot jaded, where I look back and I'm like, oh, yeah, it took me a while to realize that I had great mentors throughout. But where was that moment of belief for you where this was something I can really sink my teeth in and
right.
push this ideal forward for these young girls to be able to get exposed to something that's more than just aviation with all the STEM and even the whole gamut of things and making those little brains start to work in a way they never worked before.
Yeah. I mean, as you were asking the question, I can't really think of any one big moment of belief. I think it's all of the little tiny moments added up over the course of the time that I've been a part of pre-flight. So, for example, like my first camp that I volunteered for, I was kind of in more of like an observer mode because it was my first time. And, the old, well, not old, the people that have been around for a while were running camp, and I was just kind of there observing. And so I think a lot of times, you have kids, so you kind of understand when you're talking and interacting with them. Sometimes you can't gauge, like, am I getting through to them? Are they having a good time? Are they enjoying what they're doing right now? Sometimes it's a little hard to tell, especially maybe the first day when they're all a little nervous. They don't want to answer questions wrong, so they're not raising their hand. But then throughout the week, right, you can just see them light up, and people that were maybe quiet at first, all of a sudden out of the blue say, "Hey, do you know that really cool black pointy plane in the Air Force?" And I'm like, "Oh, are you talking about like the B-1 maybe?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fly that someday." And I'm like, "What? Okay, great. That's awesome." And so just little tiny things like that happen throughout the week. And then of course, we get the surveys back, so we give them a survey in the beginning of camp and at the end of camp, and just response after response after response is them all just saying, "This was the best camp ever." Like, I had the greatest time. Like, we asked them, "Do you think you could be a pilot?" And just overwhelmingly 100% say, "Yes, yes, yes," when maybe at the beginning of the camp, they didn't know what it took to be a pilot or didn't know if they wanted to be a pilot. And so, of course, we're always trying to, like, make every girl wanna be a pilot, but it's more than that, as you know, it's, like, building their confidence and everything. And then, in addition to that, it's later on down the road or they'll come back to camp. We have a lot of returning campers that just wanna come back year after year after year, and part of me feels a little bit bad because we're not in the point of the program where we have, like, I wanna have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for those returning campers to do something a little different every year. But right now, it's the same thing every year, and they come back every year to do the exact same lessons over and over and over again. And then they'll come back and they'll tell us, for example, I really wanted to join Civil Air Patrol, but it was all boys. And so I didn't want to walk in the room or I didn't know how to. And after pre flight, I joined Civil Air Patrol. I didn't feel weird about being the only girl there. And I felt really confident because I thought about the counselors at pre flight standing there with me. And it's like, oh my gosh, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, like, I don't know what will. And so, yeah, it's just kind of a compilation of all these campers and all these lives that we've touched. We always say that the campers are our primary focus, but the wider group of volunteers and our board members that help us there, that's also we're building a secondary connection, secondary network with all these amazing women volunteering their time, and we've been able to see them get a lot of the goals that they've been going after, being hired by regionals, going from just students to being hired by regionals, getting scholarships. And so we just support and celebrate each other. And it's just this amazing, like, who wouldn't want to be a part of that amazing community and volunteer their time?
So true. I love seeing that stuff and just the stuff, little things that I get to do in TPN. When you drill down to exact moments in camp, that is there a moment, or maybe a lesson or something that occurs where you can actually see, especially for that first year camper where their mindset flips? Morgan, I'm going to hit you first with this, and then we'll go to Brittany. What do you see on their face, and what's that moment, and then what do you actually see? Like, as an instructor, the light bulb goes on, and when you see it, it's so cool. How does that work with somebody who's so young? Remember, for those of you who don't know, these girls are between 11 and 14 years old. These are not kids who are 18 or older. They're still figuring themselves out in that aspect of it. Like, so what are those? What's that moment when you see their mindset flip?
I think it depends on the camper, but I have seen a lot. So we try to incorporate as much hands-on activities as we can. So in particular, there's this one where they make a wind tunnel out of cereal boxes and they put like streamers on it and they use a hair dryer to put air through it. And they experiment with different airfoils and what that does to the airstream. And a lot of times we'll kind of guide them through specific airfoils or shapes and different ways that they can experiment with it. But after a certain point, we just kind of like let go and we watch them. Like they'll run around the room and they'll find a stapler and be like, oh, what does this do? And then they'll like turn it upside down and be like, oh, can we like get a ball to float in the air? And so this lesson that maybe we said, oh, you just need to do XYZ and that's the lesson. It's like, we'll still be there an hour later and they'll be experimenting and we'll just let them go with it, right? We'll make up the time later, whatever. And then I know this other moment, sometimes I we can't really do things as hands-on or interactive as we want them to be. And I feel like it's a little too much school because I'm like, who wants to come to school in the summer, right? But they'll be asking questions and they'll be engaged. And we had a aeronautical engineer one year teach our weight and balance lesson, I think. And so she got into, like, the math of, like, weight and balance, and at first I was like, "Oh, no, you're gonna lose them," but they loved it, and they kept asking questions, and I was just like, oh, I was just blown away by how right, these girls are just so smart, and they want to be taught, they want the information, and they just are really excited to be given the opportunity to, like, experiment and being given challenging things to do, yeah.
Brittany, same
Yeah.
thing, or is it, did you
Yeah, I have one specific lesson in mind, Morgan. This happened at Texas camp when I was one of your volunteers. It's the E6B lesson that we do. I know it sounds so crazy because a lot of us pilots are like, "Oh, E6B, like I don't want to touch it." But we had girls that because the way we structure the lesson is where we use math problems and let them work out the math problems with the E6B. And then we get into like what you would actually use an E6B for during your flight training and plotting your course and all of that. And these girls were like using that E6B better than we could as the volunteers. And I was like, I was so amazed at how quickly they could pick something that I know I struggled with during my training, pick it up so quickly and just kind of run with it and not get frustrated or not think it's boring. But they're like, look what I did. I could do this math problem on it. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, and I
So
feel like I could just, like, keep piling on too, like, phonetic alphabet, they act like it's the secret language, and they just love, like, repeating it and knowing what each letter is, and again, like, sometimes you're not sure if you're engaging with them or interesting or, if the lesson is of interest to them, but you'll walk around the room, and we give them these, journals to take notes in, we give them little notebooks to take notes, and their notebooks will be full of notes, just, like, copying down every single thing we're telling them. I mean, it's like a teacher's dream, right? It's like, "Oh my gosh, they're listening to me." Yeah.
those I can tell you from being married to an educator, that is something that lights up them when they have that feeling at school, which doesn't happen all the time, but
yeah.
it sounds like it happens a lot there. When you think about one camper in particular that you still think about, is there maybe not a name, but just one person that you think about? What changed for her specifically that you saw? Brittany, I'll let you take this one first. If it's
Oh man.
I mean, I'm sure
Okay.
there's a lot, but
No. Actually, I think I have a really good and Morgan, it drives Morgan nuts when I tell this story, but we had one camper that I feel struggled with a little bit of confidence at our Texas camp. And there was some like miscommunication when she wanted to talk to the Civil Air Patrol. And so that was what, Morgan, 4 years ago. And now she's back. She's a part of the Civil Air Patrol. She's back as a junior counselor, hopefully for her second year this year, right, Morgan? So
Mhm.
watching her grow from this timid girl who like didn't want it was interested in the Civil Air Patrol, but didn't want to talk to the Civil Air Patrol to being in the cap and then now coming back as a junior counselor for hopefully a second year in a row. I think that's probably one of our greatest stories, so
future F-35 pilot right there. What about you, Morgan?
I think I just go back to that girl I talked about, right? She was so quiet. She was just so timid, and by the 3rd day, she just kinda, like, yeah, quietly came up to me, and she was like, because I said I was in the Air Force, so she was like, "Oh, yeah, what's that Air Force plane that's black and pointy?" And I was like, "Oh, I think it's this one," and I showed her a picture, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fly that," and I was like, "Yeah, you are. You are gonna fly that." Like, I just thought it was so cool. And, yeah, that her mom follows up and, like, sends us pictures, like, she dressed up like an Air Force pilot for Halloween, and, yeah, it's just great.
I think it all uh, when I hear all this stuff, the reflection on it is to me is like you see growth, rapid growth,
yeah.
and expanding their horizons and realizing it's more than just flying an airplane. There's so much more that goes into it. You have to
Yeah.
have good work ethic, study habits. You have to understand a lot about a little bit of everything in science to be a pilot. Whether or not you stay proficient at that later in your career is up to you professionally speaking. But when you're young, it's like there's so much, and I would venture to say for me, and for others out there, that's kind of what drew you in is because you're kind of a jack of all trades and you're an expert at one thing, and that's making the houses get bigger and smaller. But then everything else is like, a little bit about meteorology, about aerodynamics, about physics, about mechanical engineering. Maybe not really well, but some of it. And it all culminates in this discovery flight day, right? Like they get to go and actually do what they've been studying about. So, what do you do before we get to the airplane so they're ready for that moment? Like, what I mean, that's a huge buildup, right? Like, it would be for me as a little kid. How do you prepare them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the flight is a really good carrot and a really good goal, right? They know that they're not just learning this just to learn it, like they're actually going to be applying it. And we tell them, like, if you are comfortable, you will be taking the controls on Friday. Like you're gonna be given the controls of an aircraft. And then also we expect you to make a radio call or two. And so, right, it's like this quiz at the end of camp, right? Were you paying attention? Um, but yeah, so we have our core lessons and I always leave one off, but they include like aerodynamics. You start with the basics, weight and balance, weather, help me out, Brittany. I always forget the core
Communications,
communication.
communications, navigation, and then women in aviation history.
Right. Yeah. And then kind of sprinkled in between, we've added some lessons about like the flight pattern, like how do you fly a pattern? How do you land? And some of like the airport operations, like how to read signs at an airport and navigate around an airport environment. And so yeah, I mean, you just break it down into these little subjects and maybe they seem intimidating, like, "Oh, I'll never be able to figure that out, or I'll never be able to remember that." But, we practice it throughout camp. We do like a scavenger hunt where they get to practice radio calls at each spot using a walkie-talkie, so they get plenty of practice. And then, yeah, just encouraging them. And I think they see everybody else doing it and they see everybody else enjoying it. And maybe I've seen them get into the cockpit and just act like, "I'm just gonna sit here. I'm a little scared." And then when they land, the CFI will say, "Oh my gosh, she did amazing. She made 5 radio calls," and we'll hear her on the radio, right? And she'll just have the greatest time. So even some of the even though we give them all the tools that they need to succeed in that flight and at least understand what's going on in the flight, because I think that's really important. A lot of good organizations do offer discovery flights, but there's not that build up and that education that goes into it. And so I think they end up being more like passengers instead of like active participants, feeling like that's something that they can do. Like, right, once again, just as something as simple as listening to the radios and understand what's being said, or when they come in for landing, like understanding why and how they're getting into the landing pattern and just being a really active participant and feeling like they understand it gives them a lot of confidence. And then I know, right, my daughter's been 3 years, and so she goes back to school and she gets to tell all of her peers that she's flown an airplane, and everyone's like, "What?" So that's always a good confidence booster to say you've done something that most people haven't.
One of the parts about pre-flight is it's all female as far as the mentor programs are involved or discussed. And why is an all female mentor environment just like a non-negotiable? I mean, to me, it's obvious having two daughters. But and Brittany, I'm going to gear this a little bit towards you because of where you're at in your aviation journey.
Mhm.
Is 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 there a noticeable piece there to say, "Hey, they did it, you can do it too," or is there something even deeper than that that a guy like me who doesn't really understand? Because my whole career, I've seen most people like me fly airplanes. So it's to
Yeah.
me, it was like, "Oh, well, they can do it, so can I." What do you see, for that being this critical piece to the pre-flight camp?
So I feel like imposter syndrome is a big thing amongst us women in the aviation industry, especially with it being so male dominated. And I feel that having a female mentor, it they're able to kind of get you, they relate, most of them do relate to that the way that you do. I'm not saying all of them do, but it's kind of difficult to explain like, hey, I feel like, yes, I have my ratings and all of this, but I feel like I'm not good enough to do this. I feel like a man just doesn't really understand that in a sense that a woman or a woman would. So I feel like that's like a big, at least personally for me, a big selling point in having a female mentor. Now, me being a mentor to a mentee, I feel that like just again, like I said, I didn't have anybody like that growing up. So having someone who could guide me through the process would have been great for me. And I just want to give that back to one of our campers, which I have for the past 3 years and really enjoy doing and watching her grow. So
Yeah, and we have actually welcomed some new male mentors to the
Oh,
program and at least one male counselor, just because we want to make sure that we're sending the message like men are not the problem, right? Men are not the enemy. Men are very supportive and can be a great resource, and so we don't want to make it like a like we don't welcome men into the program or to help out with the program, but it is right by design woman centric just because of right that role modeling that we're doing.
it is I couldn't agree more. It's not a guys versus girls thing, right?
Right.
We're kinda all in it together, and for those of us,
Yeah.
I always make the joke where I've been to a lot of parties with pilots, and it's fun, but I am one of those people who, don't like all the same dudes to be at the same party every single time. I mean, there's my core group of friends that, yes, sometimes we need guys' night out and whatever, but the reality is when you start to bring more people in, you get such a breadth of experience and knowledge base
yeah.
that you can share. There's so much more to share, and you can start to understand what somebody else is their perspective. And if you can shift your perspective a little bit, you can understand even to a greater extent what you can do professionally and personally as well, but better to make your life better when you go out and you do this job as something where you're getting paid to fly, not paying to fly. And to me, I think that's just fantastic. I know my daughters look at me and they like, oh, well, dad does it. But if my wife was in the same shoes as I am, they would have a much different perspective on the capability. And it's so much so that every time they see a female pilot, they realize they're like, "Wait, so this is something," they go, "Yeah, not only is this something you can do, but there's all these jobs and this world of opportunity out there that you don't have to restrict yourself." Now, mind you, are you gonna be a WNBA player? Well, I don't know about that, but, like, genetically speaking, hun, you get blessed with that ability, but there's all these other things out there that you can do, so don't restrict your thought process, and that to me is something that's so cool about what pre-flight camps have done for these young ladies. In fact, my daughters who haven't been yet, they're not old enough. They see the patch and they see what's on the website and they see little snippets from what we've shown them and they're like, that is so cool. And they have an interest already. And I said, hey, someday let's not put the cart before the horse, but someday you can get there. Well, let's talk a little bit more about how the camp is scaled up and grown. Morgan, I wanted to hit on this is back when it started, I remember it was one location, then it scaled up, and then there was a little bit of a retraction, and now it's growing back to kind of the size again, where it should be. Is since you're running camps in 5 locations now, if I'm correct,
Right.
what is the kind of the minimum standard you kind of refuse to compromise on, where we're not going to just expand out to, 100 places like, there's gotta be that minimum standard that you have. What would you consider that to be if there's one kind of encapsulating summary to make sure that each camp is operating the exact way that you want it to operate so these girls can go out and they wanna come back and people wanna keep coming because it's got a standard that is met every time.
Yeah, I don't know if it comes down to anything quite specific, and I'm sort of a control freak, so it is really hard for me, and it was hard for me to expand and not be the camp director or be the person running things and trust that other people would run it, and I think it's in that, like, vetting of our volunteers, but most importantly, vetting of our camp directors, right? So our camp directors have either seen one camp or even two. And so far, most of them have been board members. And so this is a really core group of people that we trust to understand what our mission is and what our culture is, right? We're a very positive, it's supposed to be a very positive, fun experience for the campers and for the volunteers, right? Because the volunteers, they're volunteering their time, that entire week of their time, where they could be at their job getting paid or doing something else on summer vacation. And so it's really important to us that we keep it positive for everyone. But at the same time, right, we are dealing with youth. And so we need to make sure that it's a safe environment. We need to make sure that all of our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. And so I think as we've expanded, that's been one of our biggest challenges, like finding people we trust to expand camp and run camp for us. And I think it has been a little bit organic in the way that we've done it. Like, thankfully, we've attracted some amazing people to be recurring volunteers year after year after year. And right, we can just see by our multiple, over multiple years interactions with them that, yeah, you embody pre-flight ideals of positivity and hard work and, making sure you're organized and responsible. And so I think we've just been lucky in attracting enough people like that so far, but it definitely is, funding and the trusted people to run camp are probably our two biggest things that keep us from expanding faster and expanding more. Yeah.
Let's hit on that a little bit longer because you are a segue. You know how to segue without even knowing how to segue. They do not have a list of these questions ahead of time, but they nailed. You go, Morgan. Brittany, this one's for you, uh,
Oh, boy.
because this is directly related to your treasurer status. You nailed on, Morgan, you said about funding and scaling, and what this is kind of a two-parter. What is the
Yeah.
hardest part? Is it funding, volunteers, or logistics, like, to get the camps moving in the direction you want it to go? And then on top of that, if it is funding, because I have a feeling that might be the answer, but I might be wrong. What is the most misunderstood part, you as treasurer seeing this, of what it costs to do this responsibly, like Morgan just discussed, and then to
Yeah.
meet that minimum standard that we would discuss a little bit before?
Oof. Yeah. So I think our biggest struggle, like Morgan said, um, is funding. And for reference, to run a camp, it costs us about 11 to 15 grand to run a single camp. Tuition that we charge doesn't cover the entirety of camp. And we also give out scholarships as well to those who do need them. So I feel that that's kind of like that's what hinders our because we want to make it accessible, right, for people to for these girls to attend. So we don't want to charge like what the camp would truly cost to make it like a net zero. So we rely a lot on our sponsors and our and grants and stuff like that, as Morgan had said, to fund these camps. It just we sometimes it's just not always enough. And we do want to continue to give out these scholarships to individuals to attend. And like Morgan and I have had a discussion this year about how much we can give out and how much we feel like would give us like a safety net because we want to end camp also with a safety net because we have annual expenses too that are outside of camp. So um yeah, just finding sponsors or essentially more grants. And another struggle that we run into with our grants is that we're not eligible for a lot of them because technically we discriminate for camp. I know it sounds so wild, but because we only allow girls to attend camp, that wipes out like a whole chunk of grants and scholarships that we are not able to apply for. So,
So for those.
Yeah, and I
Oh,
oh, well, I was gonna touch on your question as well. Like, I'd say the logistics we have down. Like, we pretty much
yeah.
know what it takes to run a camp. We know what we need, especially if we're establishing a new location. If we have somebody to run it, we've got it down. Like, we know how to run camp now. But yeah, it's kind of like that. The discovery flights, as you can imagine, are probably our most expensive piece, and then we have volunteers coming in from all over, so we do house them at an Airbnb, and that also, like, expands that mentorship ability between our volunteers. Because after camp, there's a real, a lot of chances to mentor each other and hang out with each other and learn from each other and just talk. And so, yeah, it's not cheap to run camp, and we would like to give it for free to everyone. And we just yeah.
I understand that one, completely. And, it it goes into now this is just a question that I have about because you start something that seems a little like wide-eyed and wild when Liz first did this, similar to what we did with TPNX. A lot of people are like, "What are you, nuts?" And it's expensive, it's all this stuff.
Yeah.
Is you try a lot of different things. What's one thing that Preflight Camp has tried over the years that just didn't work? And you learned from that, and you'd warn another nonprofit, "Hey, just stay away from this completely. It's not a great idea." What's one thing that it's different aviation space, a lot different than a lot of other places out there, but there's always parallels. So what is, like, one thing that you've seen that just didn't work?
I mean, I think the most obvious thing is that we started as an overnight camp. So we would put them up in the dorms at a university. That's when Liz started the camp. And then I took over right during COVID. And so it became pretty clear that after COVID, we had to change the way we did things. And a day camp was going to make it a little less risky to run immediately after COVID. And then after we ran that first year as a day camp, we realized this is a lot easier to run. You don't have to worry about, watching them 24/7, finding a university that will give you dorms, or maybe you have to pay for the use of those dorms, and it just balloons the cost of camp. And so there's just so many pros to having it as a day camp that kind of came out of COVID. Also, as a new president taking over the camp, I didn't want to immediately like change everything. And so it kind of was this natural progression, and that really turned out really well for us. I think it helps us, uh, keep our volunteers year to year as well because it's just exhausting having a 24/7 camp. And now at the day camp, the volunteers get to have some fun too when the kids go home, and so I think it makes a better experience for everyone.
I I can imagine. I can imagine that. I always thought about being a Boy Scout, and then years later, I go, "Man, those scout leaders stayed with us for a whole week at camp." I go,
It's
I'm pretty sure that they had more than just coffee in their mugs at times because they had to deal with all of us. So yeah, exhausting definitely is the word I would use.
Yeah, but I mean, that's why we wanna keep expanding because now you have to be local or a lot of families will come and take vacations locally while their daughter attends camp.
It's what I found.
Um, yeah, and so that's why we really wanna be in as many locations as possible to make it as accessible as possible. And then, you didn't ask this question, but right, in terms of, like, expansion, I've always wanted to do, like I said, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and so we have a lot of ideas for camp, and I think it really just comes down to some of the resources. Just a lot of times, we're too small to get the attention of a lot of people that could help us out, but in the meantime, it's like, well, how do you grow to get big enough to get their attention? And so we're constantly in this kind of, like, grassroots situation where we're thankfully getting enough support to keep going, but right, I've got pie in the sky ideas, like phase 3 would just be flying the whole week, right? And they'd get almost enough hours to go home and get, like, their PPL, for example, and so you would really, take these girls from, maybe they come to us at 10 years old, and they come back every year, and by the time they're 17, 18, they've got their PPL, and
That's
um,
that would be awesome. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I just thinking I was just sitting there writing a note to myself to remind you at the end, but also, I'm gonna I'll put a bid in for Oshkosh. It is centralized to aviation and the support you might have too many people who wanna attend something like that because of all the connections in Oshkosh, and people move to Wisconsin just to be close to that. I can attest to friends of mine who've done
wow.
that here, and I think when you start to look at the volunteer force and the people that come and give their time and what they're giving to these young girls and the leadership. skill set that it takes to not only be a volunteer, but just to have the ability to go and fly the airplane and then also deal with 11 through 14-year-old girls who have a curiosity that they want to grow. When you are thinking about that from the perspective of now the camper, is what are you trying to intentionally install in them as they go throughout this, especially the first time campers? Is like you said, you had two timid young ladies who came in and they couldn't even articulate the words that they wanted to for what they were trying, what they wanted to be. Uh, you 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 said you've such a clear cut syllabus. What's one of the pieces of that leadership installation? Because as we all know, as pilots, you become the leader in on the flight deck. Whether or not you're solo, if you're a solo pilot, you have to have your own personal leadership skills to fly the airplane. Brittany, you know this right now for what you're doing. And as you grow, I always taught as an instructor, think of your next crew position. So if you're a co-pilot, you're I want you thinking like an aircraft commander in the military. And then when you're an aircraft commander, I want you thinking like an instructor. So you're the leader. Are there specific pieces of that that you are trying to teach them? Aside from all this cool STEM stuff and understanding history about it and how that works, but this is now a chance for you to become a leader in your own field. Brittany, I'll let you take this one and then more.
We'll let Morgan go first because I feel like this is a great one for her.
Oh, all right. All right. Hey, way to go. Hey, you've got a real. You're going to be a great first officer. Pass the buck. That is.
Just but I know these are well, I know Morgan's strengths, so this is one of her strengths. This question
And you
is.
butter her up too. Perfect. You've got this done. Oh, perfect. You can fly. You can swing gear for me anytime.
The first thing that comes to mind is how we structure our lessons. So every single lesson is the lesson itself, and then after the lesson, we have these introspective discussions. And so we break up into small groups to try to get them talking a little bit more. And we ask questions like, "Hey, we just learned about weather and what happens when there's weather that you didn't predict, and what do you do when you get up there, and there's situations that you didn't prepare for. What do you do in life when there's situations that you didn't prepare for or something that you couldn't have predicted, and how do you handle those situations?" And so we kind of walk them through like, I mean, it usually all the lessons boil down to like, what are some tools in your toolboxes, and how do you stay calm? How do you utilize the resources around you? They're all sort of themed a little bit differently, but they all generally boil down to just discussing like, yeah, how do we deal with situations like that? And a lot of times the counselors will interject stories from their own experiences. Especially like we love to tell stories about when we failed, because people don't like talking about that, right? They like talking about how amazing they are. And so I think just through those discussions, we guide them through what are resources that you can rely on in hard and difficult situations or when you have to make hard decisions. And then, hopefully in the future, when they come across situations like that, they can look back and say, "Oh, I can deal with this because I remember Brittany telling a story about when she failed and she thought she was just done with, but she kept going and now she's a pilot," right? And so I think those stories are a really important piece to the lessons that we do, that it's not just teaching them about aviation, it's relating the lessons back to their life. And hopefully that translates to leadership. I think we do have like a specific introspective discussion about like what makes a good leader. But we don't necessarily talk very specifically about like leadership. I think it's more them observing us talking about it and observing us doing it, and then giving them opportunities to be a leader in their own groups and activities that they're leading. Yeah.
Noticed over my time that if you tell a student age it doesn't really matter to but something specifically, do this, do that, doesn't register the same way as if they experience it for themselves. So I think kind of going about it in a like a roundabout way, or not hitting it directly on that and allowing them to experience what leadership can look like is something way more profound than if you just say, "This is what a good leader does." Well, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's how can you implement that? And the only way to really learn it is through some experiential stuff, right? Like maybe you have a little, like you said, maybe you have one little discussion about good leadership. So I'm a big fan of that kind of way to go about things. And I've I've been a big believer of that my entire career, and I try to do that with my own daughters too. I let them lead, and sometimes it's a f they don't do it the way I would do it, but that's their personalities, and a lot of times I see that when I let them go, it works out better because they're using their own gifts and talents and skills that they're acquiring and not just, like, regurgitating some stuff that I told them to do. So
Yeah, and I think, society and media, they show us what everybody, the stereotypical leader, usually it's a white male that's making decisions and barking orders. And I think, especially for women, it's really important to see that not all leaders are like that, and not all leaders that are like that are effective. And it's really just kind of through role modeling that we do every day at camp and through our mentorship program because we're at camp in shorts and a camp t-shirt and we're running around the room talking about aerodynamics and just being kind of dorky and fun. But we introduce ourselves in the beginning and we say, right, like I'm an active duty Air Force officer, or I'm a Delta pilot. And then at the end of camp, we all get into our uniforms for graduation and they can see, like, oh, like, yeah, this person that's just been kind of my camp counselor all week. Oh, yeah, they're a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And so just I think that role modeling and that realization that not everybody is that cookie cutter image of what everybody thinks a leader looks like or what a pilot looks like is really important for them to see that they can be themselves and still be a pilot or be, right, an engineer or an astronaut or whatever they want to be.
I think that leads into the next question I have is now for the grown-ups listening out there. Um, Somebody's listening or thinking about, I'm not really qualified to help in this way. Brittany, this one's really for you because
Yeah.
where you're at in your career, who are who is pre-flight looking for to come out and participate in these camps as far as volunteerism goes?
Yeah, so we're just looking for, again, like Morgan said, male and female volunteers to come out that have just any passion for aviation or helping individuals gain access to learning how to like get their goals and just anyone who can help, yeah, help our campers through the process. You don't necessarily have to have like experience with it with children or with teenagers, just a passion to help and yeah.
Yeah, you'll teach them the rest, and they'll learn quickly.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't have kids out there, you'll learn real fast what registers and what doesn't.
Yeah. Most of our volunteers don't have experience working with kids, so and they do fantastic, throughout camp, and they're reoccurring volunteers as well, so.
That's awesome. I think, to close up, I wanted to ask, and Morgan, this one's really for you, and Brittany, you can chime in as well, of course.
Mhm.
Let's fast forward 10 years, and instead of saying, "What does pre-flight camp look like?" Because that's a standard question, is what would you say where you could look back after 10 years ago, "Yep, this worked. This is where I wanted it to be." We talked about the phases a little bit, but if we can get a little bit more granular on the detail, like you have this pie in the sky image, what are we looking at? So you say, "That worked. Nailed it."
Yeah, I mean, you said not what it looks like, right? Because in my head, what it looks like is more locations, but it's not just about expanding, right? It's about reaching more girls because we have seen how it reaches them and how it affects them and how it encourages them and changes them after just a week at camp, not to mention when they come back year after year and participate in the mentorship program. If we can triple, quadruple, however much we can do to double that impact that we're seeing just on this small scale with 5 camps. I mean, big enough. Unfortunately, it's really hard to measure that. Like, were we successful? Like, we try to do it through surveys. We do it through keeping up with them through their mentorship program. We link them up with mentors. We kind of follow them along their journey. Not all of them become pilots, and that's fine, right? We just want them to gain the confidence to do whatever they want to do and feel like there are no limits on what they can do. If they go into aviation, that's extra bonus because we think aviation's great. But um, you know, I got the impact that I wanted. You look at the overall numbers of female pilots or female aeronautical engineers, right? If we can move that or feel like we moved that up at all, even though we might not be able to prove it. And we're doing that through our campers and through our volunteers, right? So, like, our volunteers are, like I said, creating this network, positive network of supporting each other, and so it's really this kind of continuum from 10 years old all the way to, like, we have volunteers that are 45, 50 that still need a support network. And of course we have like junior counselors as well. So if you're a prior camper, you can come back and be a junior counselor. And so I don't know, that's kind of a long convoluted answer because it is something really hard to measure, but it's just that positive impact that we're constantly striving for. Anytime I see, as a father of daughters, anytime I see all this media just highlighting the fact that what we value women for, and usually it's not for what they can do, for their brains, for how good they are in science. Usually it's not for those things because that's not what captures social media audiences. Um, I just want to kind of like counter that with what we think women and girls are capable of, just to show them that they are capable of that. Like, you don't just have to be a YouTube star, right? You can be a pilot and a YouTube star. Sure, do both. But, improve the world in some way with your impact. And I think that's just what we're always striving for.
Well, you're doing it. I can attest
Yeah.
to that. A couple of things I want you to add on to these things. These are what I know. What I want for the parents out there of daughters who are listening who may be interested is the application window is open to the camp, right? February 1st was when it opened. There's 5 locations. You can go check those out on the website, preflightcamp.com. And you get on the newsletter if they will update you with all that kind of stuff. For the pilots and the aviation pros and the aviation enthusiasts out there who want to find a way, but they don't know how, or money is not the thing, or they want to be more involved than just money, is you can volunteer. As we talked about many times throughout this, is pre-flight camp is looking for passionate people involved in aviation. And one thing I do know about volunteers is they may want to participate, but something comes up in life where they can't. And so the volunteer churn is real. And as much as you may have returning volunteers, there's at some point where they won't be able to do that anymore. And you want to keep that corporate knowledge flowing and keep volunteers recurring until they can no longer do it and pass that information along. So if you're interested, go to preflightcamp.com, let them know of your interest. This is something that you're going to help out generations. And by the way, if you're selfish like I am, you're going to get more out of it than you probably gave. I I can attest to that throughout what
Yeah.
we're done. Volunteering you will learn more than they will learn, and you'll be shocked at what you figure out. And then finally, for those out there who have the ability to sponsor or donate, these scholarships truly matter. You're going to be helping somebody who could never have experienced this gain a larger breadth and put our world in a better place than it was if you didn't. They have given out, I think it's something around $34,000 in scholarships, roughly thereabouts, maybe more by this point.
I think maybe more by this point, especially as we expand, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So be part of that train. We at TPN have done this as much as we can. We have plans for that this year. We want individuals to be part of this as well. And if you have the ability to do more and help pre-flight grow into what Morgan and Brittany want it to become, get a hold of me, get a hold of them, and we will make sure that you can figure that out. So if this kind of hits you or you understand what this is about, don't just clap on the sideline and say, "Hey, great job, ladies." Get involved. there's lots of different ways to get involved, and tell somebody else who might have or want to take this opportunity, whether it's for them or for their kids. This is a unique and outstanding example of paying it forward with something that we preach in the pilot network is pay it forward. And this is the aspiring side of it. And the retiring side, this is a way for you to help out too. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you want to leverage at this point in the conversation? Because I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, I think you said it really perfectly. I think it's important to note that there's just a huge range that you can contribute, right? Whether it's money that you want to give us, we love money. We will do great things with that money. But that's not all we need, right? We, like you said, we need the volunteers. You can provide discovery flights if you're a CFI during camp. You can come be a graduation speaker if you think you've done something amazing with your life and you want to share it with the campers. You could put us onto a location that might be willing to donate space for us to hold camp, or a good location you think that would be fun, that there's a good community for us there, that we might be able to establish a new camp. And so we really are grassroots and we function through those connections and all of those ways that people help us in whatever way they're able to.
Amazing. Ladies, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for being supporters of what we're trying to do. And the fact that we can reciprocate in any small way means the world, especially, like I said before, you don't have to have daughters. You don't even have to have kids to rally behind something. But for me, this is an extra special piece of me because aviation has changed my life. It turned me into who I am. I can't see myself doing anything else with my career. I wouldn't have been good at it. And to have my daughters have a possibility of an opportunity like this, whether or not they get into this world means very little. It means the ability to grow into the person that they truly are meant to become. So thank you so much for just providing an opportunity for so many young ladies to be able to find whatever spark it is in their life that they may not have otherwise been able to touch at such a young age. So kudos to you. Keep crushing it out there. How can people get a hold of you and how can they participate outside of what we just discussed? Is there besides the website, is there ways they can get a hold of you directly and maybe offer whatever they can offer?
Info at preflightcamp.com is our main email account. You could always contact me, Morgan at preflightcamp.com. If you also want to check out more of what we do, we have a great social media manager, Farron. Woohoo, shout out to Farron. So she's doing great posting videos and everything. Pictures worth 1,000 words and a video is worth a million words. So if you want to watch videos and stuff, we tried TikTok. We have some TikTok videos and YouTube videos. But yeah, check us out. But always feel free to contact me or just our main line, the info at preflightcamp.com. Yeah, and I did want to thank you before we hop off. You've been a supporter since the very beginning. So yeah, you're not just hopping on a bandwagon, right? You've been with us from the very beginning and always offered us support. So thank you for doing that.
It's my pleasure. It feels like an honor to be part of it. And in the beginning, it's really cool to see something grow like it has. For those of you out there who didn't get that, you want to comment, critique anything that I ever say, hey guys, pilotnetwork.com. I respond to every email. And I want you to know that I can help out. If you have questions that you don't necessarily want to ask them, ask me. I'll tell you how to do it. And I won't be as kind. I will just tell you this is what you do. So thanks again, ladies. I appreciate your time today. And
Thank
well,
you.
you're very welcome. I'd be remiss if I didn't say keep the shiny side up and the greasy side down. Fly safe, everybody.